Welcome to this episode of Tech Threads. I'm your host, Max Watson. And today, this episode is dedicated to analytics and data. We're answering two statements and questions that PMs have. I need to get better at data, and how can I get better at data? With Taylor Heyman, who is a principal operations engineer at Domo. Well, Taylor, welcome to Tech Threads.
Hey, Max, good to be here. Happy to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun one because we're kind of mixing it up a little bit. Normally, when we have guests on, we kind of have like a couple small topics and then we just kind of see where the conversation goes. But you've prepared some awesome things for us to talk about today. For those listening, we're going to basically answer the questions because a lot of PMs have about, hey, I need to get better at data and how can I get better at data? And then we're kind of talking about this idea that you have that I think is really interesting and probably going to be the future of how engineering, design, and product management are all going to kind of mesh together, especially with AI, how that's boosting productivity of a lot of things. So, Taylor, before we jump into it, could you please explain who you are, kind of what you do, and your background?
Yes, for sure. So, hey everybody, I'm Taylor Heyman. I'm based out of Springville, Utah. So if anybody's down south in Utah County wants to hang out, let me know. Happy to do it. I am currently a principal operations engineer at Domo, and excuse me, I'll kind of follow that up with two things. One, kind of explain what the heck a principal operations engineer even is, and then two, a little bit of how I got there. So. Principal operations engineer, it's a perfect mix and blend of product management, data and analytics engineering, and operations. And so if you're asking yourself, why is this dude's not even a PM, what is he doing here? I have a background of product management, and product management is a huge part of my role today. As a principal operations engineer, my job is to own and build, kind of like a player coach role, own and build data products as well as business processes and workflows and stuff like that. So, especially working at like a principal level, product management is a huge part of it, being able to work with stakeholders and bring everything together. But the fun part is that I'm also the engineer, so when it comes time to make things come to life, rather than kind of tossing it over the fence and crossing your fingers, I get to go put fingers to keyboard and build and make things come to life as well. So I have that product management background. I've worked for a bunch of startups. I think there's two that's worth calling out. One, I worked for a restaurant software company in Utah, based in Utah, and I was kind of their head of product and data while I was there, and helped grow the company to 3 million in ARR, annual recurring revenue, in about 18 months. So, there's a lot of growth and learning there, and I had a huge product portfolio of like all the restaurant tech. For any of the locals that have ever been to Swig, all of their tech runs on everything that I built. So if you're ever there and looking at, their point of sale, kitchen operations, mobile apps, and all that stuff, that's all the stuff that I built. So that was fun. Hopped around a couple other startups, and then the second one that's worth calling out is I worked for a fintech, where I worked with their internal like sales and operations teams, and I built their lead distribution platform. So a sales lead comes in, we had to qualify it, figure out which rep it was going to go to, and so that was a platform that managed a user base of 5 million users. Every 5 minutes, it would evaluate them against over 100 different classifications, classify them, figure out which rep to go to. And so that was a big, mission critical piece of the business that managed 5 million users, about 90 million in annual revenue, and had invested executives across the whole business. So that was a big fun project as well. And so those are the two big ones worth calling out, but some of that like product management, data, and engineering experience that got me to where I am today at Domo.
Yeah, and what do you think with all that experience? I mean, how has data played a role in that? And what do you think PMs can learn kind of coming from a data perspective on how they can better use their data?
Yeah, so I always say that like the biggest factor that has played into my success in my career and as a product manager has been my data skills. And the two questions that you kind of mentioned at the beginning that I always hear from people most, and like from business stakeholders, from PMs the most, is, excuse me, how do I get better at data? And or just saying I need to get better at data. And so that's a pretty vague question, and I always kind of break it down into a couple things. It was like, what does that mean? You could mean like, hey, on the technical side, I want to get better at like accessing data and working with data myself. It could be, and I asked a couple people leading up to this conversation as well. I was like, hey, you guys, when you say this, what do you actually mean? And these are some of the things I broke it down at too. So the technical side, there could be just like figuring out, hey, I have all this data. What questions should I even be asking? And, what are the right questions to ask? And then the last one, too, being like, how do I actually place the right bets? And, what's the right move? Like maybe I'm asking questions and I'm getting insights, but what do I actually do with it? And so those are the three things I kind of break it down into and say, hey, if you are a PM that wants to get better at data, first thing is ask yourself, what are you actually what are you actually asking for? The technical, what questions do I ask, or how do I like, take action on these insights? So I can break those down for you a little bit more. We can go into detail on some of those.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, so I can start on the technical side. I'll keep this one short just because I don't think that PMs need to be so technical. I think we need to be more technical. And again, if we get to that kind of that hybrid, we can talk more on that. But if you want to get better at data and like on the technical side and better at accessing data yourself, the number one skill that I'm biased, but I believe everybody needs to learn this is just to learn SQL. There's so
Mhm.
much SQL, but say it SQL, everybody please.
Yeah, please.
There are so many free resources available online. There's like W3 schools, just type in Google or
Mhm.
whatever, like, hey, free SQL course. There's tutorials, YouTube, whatever. And then, of course, in the age of AI, you can use that as your brainstorming and tutor and learn that. But SQL, there's a saying where they say you can learn SQL in a day, but it takes a lifetime to master it. SQL is like the easiest programming language there is. The barrier of entry is so low that you can literally in an hour or two, like knock out some tutorials, watch some videos, and then start writing some queries on your own. And you can use that to, pull data from your database. And so there's no excuse in my mind for anybody not to go spend a little bit of time and learn that skill to get better at accessing data and just pulling your data yourself. And that way you don't have to rely on someone else or send up a ticket and hope it gets back to you in time. Like
Mhm.
it's a low barrier of entry. So spend the time doing that. The other piece on the technical side that I say that's probably talked about a lot less, but I think is starting to get talked about more in the data world is data modeling. And
Mhm.
that's actually understanding like the data lifecycle and how to even talk data. I think it's important to understand the data life cycle because as you understand the data life cycle, you start to understand how data gets stored and how you can access it and what it means and how you talk with it and all that stuff. And so just so everybody's on the same page and aware, the data life cycle kind of goes generally like this. The first thing is that you have to gather data, and that happens through your web forums, that happens through your applications. You enter in your username and you build your profile, that type of stuff. That's a process of just gathering and collecting data. Once you've collected that, you have to store it, and that's where you're putting it in your database or something like that. Somewhere along the line, you're doing some sort of transformation or manipulation of the data so that it's readable, kind of human readable, and you can work with it better. That's the phrase ETL, if you've ever heard of that. Extract, transform, load. Go do some Googling on your own in your free time and learn a little bit about that. It's a great thing to look up and learn about. And then from there, after you've stored the data, you have to access it. That's where you get into stuff like SQL and being able to pull the data out of your platforms or your database or whatever it is. And then you have to figure out how to visualize it. And then once you've visualized it, you start identifying trends and whatever, and then you have to take action on it. And so there's like formal ways of modeling data. You can hear about the Inmon method, the Kimball method, the Snowflake, like all this different stuff. Um, but data modeling is something that I think people don't hear about a lot. It's getting talked about a lot more. But if you want to get on the technical side and get better on the technical side, definitely spend some time researching and learning about data modeling.
Yeah, I mean, data modeling can be like very simple or it can be very complex. We've done reports at work that are like take 2 minutes or like take a week to actually get all the data, format it, clean it up, and then present it in a usable way. For a PM out there who might not have that experience modeling data, wants to model data, what do you think are like real life steps that you would take or that they could take to kind of give them a better idea of what like that modeling might look like or how they can implement that modeling as quick as possible?
Yeah, and I don't even think on the PM side that a PM needs to model the data themselves. Again, with the transition of things, maybe that'll happen a little bit more. But understanding data modeling, looking up and doing research on those things, ETL, the data life cycle, the Inman method, the Snowflake method, like all these different like modeling types and understanding that life cycle, it'll just open up a world of abilities for you. It'll make accessing the data easier, but when you have to start talking to software engineers and data engineers and just anything, like everything is all about this is the age of information. Every app on your phone is literally about gathering data, storing it, transforming it, allowing you to access it and, do stuff with it. And so if you understand that data modeling and do that research, you probably are not going to have to be on the front line, being the one that comes up with the data model. But, excuse me, you'll just be so much more informed and educated, and I've had people that I've talked to about this come back to me and say, hey, like you taught me about data modeling, and I feel like I can just talk to the engineers so much better. It's a whole new world for me. So just spend time researching is the first step. Look up those things that I mentioned, and hopefully it'll just open up this world of like this channel of communication that you've just never been able to do before.
Yeah, and I think with like PMs and how critical it is for them to be able to transition and pass along ideas and vision, like exactly how they're envisioning it and how the company wants it to engineering teams. I know for us, lots of times we kind of talk with non-technical people or like our clients, and we kind of lose some of like the understanding. Like they'll say one thing, but to us it means something else. And so we'll go and build and say, hey, you told us this. These are the requirements. We like signed to everything. And they're like, well, what I meant by this was like something completely different. So I think understanding and having that, verbiage, having a baseline understanding of like data and modeling could really help, PMs in that.
Yeah, and the word model is kind of unique and funny because like that literally what we're doing when we say data model is we are like modeling our reality, and we do that with data.
Mm.
Like if you're saying like, hey, I want to build this experience around whatever your product does, you need to model that reality and that experience. And how do you do that? You do it through the data lifecycle process. You gather that data from them, you allow them to manipulate it, do it all this stuff and put it out there. And so it's funny that when we say data modeling, that's literally what we're all doing is we're modeling life and these experiences and our reality. And so yeah, take some time to learn about data modeling. I promise that it's just gonna like if you're not already familiar with it, it's just gonna open up a whole new world for you and it do some good things for you.
Yeah, and I know as we kind of talked and we've been talking about these questions and you've been sending me these questions, I feel like the next, segue right into this is like asking the right questions. You can have all the data in the world, but getting information from that data is kind of an art. So what do you have? What are your thoughts on asking the right questions and the process that goes with that?
Yeah, so that's the other part when you say like, hey, I need to get better at data, what you're really talking about is how do I ask, how do I know what to look for? The truth is like you don't. You have that's why we have R&D, we have research and development, we have like research and investigation. If everybody knew, if we all knew what questions we needed to be asking, then we'd all just be asking those questions and we'd be getting it right all the time and all that stuff. So that's one of the tough things about data is you can't go into it feeling confident because we don't know what the questions are that we're trying to ask. It's a game of research and investigation. And so you have to
Mhm.
spend that time. Now, obviously, there's some frameworks that you can follow. Let me see if I have this book in this dresser here. I do. So there's a book. Let's see if I can get it on focus here somewhere. There you go. Yeah. Understanding
Perfect.
variation, the key to managing chaos. As you are digging through data, whatever that form that takes, you're researching and investigating, and really what you want to do is you want to identify trends and anomalies. Like anybody can pull out a number and be like, "Hey, we got 100 signups today." Like, cool. What do you do? What do you do with that? You have to identify like, is this a trend? Is it an anomaly? Like, hey, we had
Mhm.
100 signups today. That's great because our average is like five. Like, what happened? And let's keep doing that. Or vice versa. Like, hey, we had 100 signups today. That sucks because normally we have 1,000. Like something's probably broken or what's happening. Identify these anomalies Or if you're tracking it over time, you can say, hey, we had 100 signups today. That's great. Yesterday we had 95, like not a big jump. But if we look at that across like weeks, in the past like couple months, we've gone from an average of like 50 and now we're growing, we're trending up to 100. And so as you're doing this research and just kind of like living on a prayer, searching for the needle in the haystack. What you want to be doing is looking for trends and anomalies. And if you ever see a trend, a pattern, or an anomaly, like always stop and poke around with it. Like don't just be like, oh, that's weird, and then go on to the next thing. Like there's a reason it's standing out to you.
Mhm.
That's what we're doing. We're researching and investigating. And so definitely spend time doing that and just get used to feeling lost. And you just kind of gotta keep searching. The other trick that I always give people though is focusing and making sure that you're thinking about both quantitative and qualitative data.
Mhm.
Especially for a lot of people that work in startups where they're like, hey, like we don't even have data or we don't have very much data. That's okay. The world works that way too. One thing that I always have to think about is, there are drug studies done, like drugs like medicine, where they're saying, hey, we need to get this approved by the FDA. We need to make sure this is actually healthy. They're not doing tests on billions or millions or even like sometimes thousands of people. Sometimes it's like hundreds of people that they're testing this thing on. And there's 8 billion people in the world and they do these tests and they say, hey, here's some data, and we're going to say this is okay and kind of apply it to generally to everybody in the world. Like, yeah, everybody can take, 400 milligrams of ibuprofen or whatever it is, and it should be safe. Like, that's kind of crazy when you think about like you have places like Facebook that have billions of, active users where they can do whatever the heck they want and be like, oh yeah, we have plenty of data to work with. So when you think about it, it's okay to not have a lot of data, but you still need to be thinking about like, okay, qualitative versus quantitative. Qualitative, you're probably going to do a user interview with 5, 10 people. And I often, like, if I start doing user interviews and the first 4 people all say the same thing, for me, I'm like, oh, that's a pattern. That's a trend. Like, I can go and talk to the other 6 people, but I'm like 95% confident that they're all going to say the same thing, that this UI
Mhm.
sucks or this doesn't make sense or whatever. And so, start with that and talk to people and realize that they are also pulling out in that qualitative data trends and patterns and anomalies. And so same principle applies, poke around with it and see what you can do with it. On the quantitative side, it's the same thing. Go ahead and do that. And I always have 2 examples that I'll share really quick. One of them is one of my favorite stories that if anybody's ever talked to me, I've probably already shared it with them. When I worked with one of the restaurant, or when I worked with the restaurant company, there was a company we worked with where we were focused on improving loyalty and like, hey, how can we get more people to be loyal and the loyal people to be more loyal? And so as I was poking around those numbers, I noticed that the most loyal people were going to the restaurant 4, 5, 6, 7 times a day on average. That's an anomaly. That didn't make
Wow.
sense, right? It didn't make sense. So I kept crawling through the quantitative data through the database and found that those top loyal people were actually the employees. And without
Mm.
ever talking to a single person, I figured out and put the story together that the employees were putting in their own phone number to collect loyalty points when customers were coming, into the store, rather than collecting the customer's number and just racking up loyalty points. And I
Wow.
never talked to a single person. It was just straight numbers. And so I put together that report, sent it over to the executives of the restaurant, and within 2 weeks that was shut down. A bunch of people quit. Some people were fired. It was a crazy it
Oh
was a
my
crazy experience.
gosh.
But quantitative data, you look at the numbers, you see something, dig into it. On the qualitative side, I started with the fintech and I started interviewing our sales reps and I was like, hey, how's life as a sales rep? What's good? What's bad? And same thing, I talked to like 4 or 5 people and they all said the same thing. Like, hey, we do loans for small and medium-sized businesses. We have these Uber and Lyft drivers and these like people in these weird industries of like gambling and adult entertainment that are applying for loans and we can't help them because we don't do these types of loans. And so that qualitative pattern, like 4 or 5 people said it. And so I went and looked at the numbers and sure enough, none of those people ever got funding. But we built some stuff and we're able to pull those from the sales reps, send them to the marketing team instead so they could be nurtured. And that opened up space for more qualified customers to go to our sales reps, which super helped our revenue. And so, following the quantitative and the qualitative, you can find those patterns, those anomalies, and everything in both sides of it. Start on both ends and work with what you've got.
It's almost fair to say, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, you kind of fact check your qualitative with your quantitative. You find anomalies or different trends in one, and you can kind of go check the other one, and be like, hey, is this true? Or do the numbers actually, add up to things? Or does like, is this what this person said or what these five people said actually make a difference when it comes to like the bottom line?
Yeah, 100%. My saying is always, it's always fun and cool to find a qualitative something or a quantitative something. But if I found something where both the quantitative story and the qualitative story align, I know I've struck gold. And so
Mm.
I push hard on that. So yes, 100% what you said, fact check. If you can find both that align, like you've found something good and push on that.
Yeah, and it seems like, I mean, kind of what we've been talking about. Once you find these, anomalies or these trends, you recommend that we test it and you kind of like simulate it. Can you kind of dive into that and explain what your thoughts are when it comes to simulating data, testing data, and kind of like placing your bets to see if they actually work out before you like really go all in on it?
Yeah, that's the third one I talked about of like, hey, I have insights. How do I actually like take action on it? And this is my hot take for the evening. Um, One of my buddies that I asked this question to, and he was like, yeah, I want to know if there's statistical significance in the data that I'm
Mm.
looking at, and how do I know that it's legit or not? My hot take is that like 90% plus of the time statistics is BS. And that's my hot take. So let me explain it.
Yes, please
I
explain it because that's going to sound crazy to some people. They're going to be like, "What? I listened to this for 25 minutes and this is the hot take? Like, forget everything."
So I've done a bunch of research on statistics, and obviously statistics is real and it's very helpful. Like, it's good. The most interesting experience that I've had in terms of statistics is when I was doing my research and trying to learn a lot more about A/B testing and regressions and data science and all this stuff. There's this guy on LinkedIn who's known as like the godfather of statistics and specifically like A/B testing. His name's Ron Kohavi. So if anybody wants to look him up and go follow him, he's like the godfather of A/B testing on LinkedIn. He worked for Amazon and he set up their like testing platform and built, that section of the business to however large it is. It's huge these days. And so he kind of like is the fact checker of A/B testing. And so he's going around LinkedIn all the time and when people are like posting on LinkedIn, like our company did this A/B test and here's the results, like we found this game-changing insight or whatever. What I found, again, looking for patterns, I never saw him like congratulating anybody on a job well done. Everybody that was posting their, we did A/B testing and these statistics and this and that, he always would like come on and comment and say, hey, you can't trust that because of X, Y, and Z and nobody ever had a statistically significant experiment. And it was often just because, like, the biggest bottleneck that I observed was he was always saying, like, you did this experiment on 50 people. You can't be confident. You can't attribute that success or that failure to whatever you're experimenting on because that's not a big enough sample size. And so, as I read some of his papers and his research and articles and all this stuff, it became apparent to me that like real, true statistics need a large sample size to be able to set that confidence interval where you're saying we are statistically confident that this is truly successful. And, if we change this button color or the rounded edges on this button, like that's truly making a difference. Nobody except for Amazon and Facebook and Airbnb and these massive companies have that type of sample size. My take from all that is statistics is most of the time BS. And so what do we do instead? I'm a strong believer of like learning by doing. And so rather than like doing an A/B test and like saying like it's statistically significant or whatever, my recommendation, my suggestion and what I've done in life in my career is I've just done the thing and figured out, watched it and said, hey, if this isn't hurting our business, then let's figure out if we keep it or trash it. If it seems to be helping our business, like let's keep it. If we put something in and, there's an anomaly where like, hey, we changed this thing and now nobody uses our product anymore, like, that's an anomaly and that seems sketchy to me. I'm not going to do it. But so for me, rather than like setting up these like formal processes, it's just like let's do the thing, let's place a bet, and let's learn to prototype, start small, proof of concept, start with a small group, get bigger and bigger, and observe it as it goes. And if it's not hurting things, it's probably helping things. But if it seems to be hurting things, then pull it out. But so yeah, that's when it comes to that, like, hey, how do I test my bets? Just do it. And as long as it's not hurting, it's probably helping. But then it becomes a question of how much is it helping? Logistically, does it make sense? The four things that Marty Kagan talks about, the feasibility, the usability, the viability, and I always forget the fourth one. Figure out if it's good for your business. But otherwise, like, probably don't get so hung up on like, oh, well, this sample group was 51% and the other one was 49. Like, is 51 actually bigger than 40? All that stuff. Don't get hung up there.
Yeah. And I feel like that's totally true. I read a book and I can't remember the exact name of it. I might have to look it up. It's like How to Measure Anything. I don't know if you've read it. It's a big like statistics book. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. Oh. Yeah, How to Measure Anything, Douglas W. Hubbard. It's like this big, it's like actually a really thick book. I thought it'd be small, but for the first like 200 pages, he basically talks about how, yeah, you can't trust statistics. There's too many biases. There's too many like weird scenarios. There's too many like anomalies that can happen when you're like recording, how you record the data, how you ask your questions. And so I think that idea of, you know, obviously use statistics to make the better decision than just blindly doing something, but then like actually testing it. And we've had like startup people come on here and talk about it, and we've had, other PMs, and they say like, the best data you can get is with real users. Put it out there and monitor it and see what's happening. And it's interesting to see because I asked the question one time, like, aren't you afraid that that's going to hurt like your company's like face, like kind of how you're perceived by your users? And they found like a lot of times, like, no, users aren't really that, they see one weird thing happen and it like kind of rubs them the wrong way. Oftentimes, like they're not just going to like abandon you unless it's some like major huge function. But like with these small things, like you can just throw it out there and test it. And then if it's working, great. If not, like you can pull it back and revert it really quickly. And that's like a really good way. So I think the idea that you've shared and all these, the godfather of data and statistics, well, he shared, I think it's very viable. And I think product managers can really use that to kind of guide how they're looking at statistics, using statistics, prototyping, testing it, and all of the above.
Yeah, so there's my hot take for the evening and do what you want with it.
Yeah, in the comments, let's talk about it. Do you agree with Taylor and his hot take? As we're kind of wrapping up on time, we didn't really hit the whole PM engineer hybrid. I don't know if you want to talk about that today. Maybe we'll have you on again to dive deeper into it. Do you have any last kind of like things that you think PMs would find value in when it comes to data and statistics? Any pro tips? Any new tech trends that you're using that have really been helpful, or anything you think can really help them?
Yeah, I mean, like I'll just kind of reiterate what I said at the beginning. I feel like the biggest factor contributing to my success in my career has been my data skills and abilities. And I think there's no reason for anybody, doesn't matter if you're a PM, just anybody, if you want to get better and progress in your career, there's no reason that you shouldn't spend some time investing in getting better at data. What does that mean? We talked about it, right? Like on the technical side, SQL, the barrier of entry is so low. Just spend a day and it'll be worth it and it'll save you a lot of time. Data modeling, spend some time researching it. Your conversations with your software engineers, your data engineers, everybody, I promise will just change. It'll be like nothing you've seen before. But just spend some time like it's hard. Data, like I said, the data world is it's just a big world of unknown, and it's by nature an investigatory. I don't know if that's a real world, real word, an investigatory field where you're just digging around and you are just searching for the needle in the haystack. There is a, if you're in the Utah Product Guild Slack, I started the data channel. Join
Mhm.
it. We can have some great conversations there. First post I made in there was a LinkedIn post from somebody else who talked about their hot take, which was, I don't think anybody actually finds real insights in their career. Maybe once or twice, but that's it. And I think there's a little bit of truth to that. We're all just digging around. We're all just trying to find the best that we can. And, sometimes you strike gold and you get lucky, and other times you just kind of got to keep trudging along and taking bets and see which ones work and which don't. And, eventually you'll get one right and you'll feel good about yourself. So you'll keep going for the rest of the day, or the rest of the week or whatever. So yeah, I'm always open to, last thing I'll say, I'm always open. My door's open. Feel free to message me, DM me, connect on LinkedIn, whatever it is. I love talking data. I'm a huge data nerd. Reach out and happy to give advice, tips, just shoot the breeze, whatever. But Max, thanks for having me on. It's been a great chat. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming on and thanks for preparing this. I think these are really valuable, especially where we have experts like you who can really, elevate a product manager's data skills and, the way they're pulling data and how they're using it. So thanks for preparing that. Thanks for hopping on. And we'll have to have you back on to talk about your PM engineer hybrid. Because I know that as we've been, I mean, kind of maybe give a little teaser. I think it's the future. I think we're seeing it as AI is kind of getting crazier, to being able to do a little bit more every single day. You might see some, crossover between all these things. So tune into the next time Taylor's on because we're gonna have to talk about it and we'll see if
Yeah,
it, affects what you're or what PMs are doing out there. But Taylor, thanks for hopping on.
yeah. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.